Welcome to MySecurity TV and the Cybersecurity Weekly Podcast. My name's Chris Cubbage. I'm the editor with MySecurity Media. And today we're looking at SentinelOne, which, and I'll read this, it's the autonomous AI endpoint security platform. And you would have heard of SentinelOne with some of the accolades that they have been given. And today we're going to be joined by Evan Davidson, the Vice President for Asia Pacific and Japan, and also Kelvin, the Director of Security Engineering for Asia Pacific and Japan. Gents, thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning, it's a pleasure.
Great. And Evan, you're the boss there as Vice President for the region. We'll definitely get a sort of an overview of the region and how you're doing business here, but it's an international company. Autonomous AI endpoint security platform, and it's quite a broad platform as well. So that's the thing. It's trying to tell the story of SentinelOne from the beginning.
Yeah.
Maybe introduce us to the company and some of the key sort of market segments that you cover.
Yeah, fantastic. You got to say that 3 times really quickly, right? Just to test your.
It took us a little bit of time to, the autonomous AI and which AI should be really when you think about it.
Exactly.
But it's very powerful. I think that's one of the key messages you're trying to put across is that this is a powerful platform and very useful.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, look, what I'll do, I'm going to start with maybe the outcomes we try and give our customers, and I think that's kind of a good segue into kind of what we do. So the outcomes we're trying to deliver to our customers today is, number one, we want to try and prevent cyber attacks occurring in their environment. Clearly there's a lot of escalation of these issues in the public domain. We can see what's happening, and clearly we want to prevent where possible. Now, we know prevention is not always possible, so we're then trying to give our customers the ability to detect, contain, and respond to these cyber incidents in near real time where possible. And this is really the automation component. So the outcome is trying to minimize that impact at an organizational level. And we really want to give the tooling to the teams managing that so it can be as easy, as efficient, and as effective as possible in minimizing that damage to the client. Now, we do that today by deploying our software on endpoints, so workstations, servers, it could be VDI environments, cloud workloads now, and Kubernetes and containers, and we deploy that prevention, detection, and response capability as a core capability. Now, we have our partners that will help augment and support those services, and if our customers and or partners don't have the skills, we can deliver that as a managed service. Now, we have close to 6,000 customers globally today using our platform. And that's anywhere around the globe. Okay, so we've got representation in Asia Pacific, Europe, Middle East and Africa, and North America. We have a large footprint in Fortune 500 companies. We have a very high representation in the top 10 customers around the world. And then if you break that down, you might think, well, we're just a very large scale kind of platform for enterprise customers. Well, that's certainly not the case, because endpoint security, antivirus, if you think about it as most basic element, resides in SME and SOHO type customers. So we have partners help deliver managed services using our platform to help provide very robust protection capabilities. So we have the ability to service the low end of the market through our partner ecosystem, servicing up to the highest echelons within the enterprise or government sector today. So we're really pleased with the results that we've been able to make working in partnership with our partners and customers, and we look forward to seeing where this can go.
Yeah, I think it's a good sell, particularly here in Australia. And you're based in Singapore as well as your head office for the region, but definitely the small, medium enterprise market here in Australia, it's a understandable sort of point of introduction is the endpoint, their devices that they're using. That's what you're actually protecting as well.
Yeah.
And there's a new term here. We're going to talk about the SentinelOne Singularity XDR platform, which is the extended detection and response. Kelvin, maybe just talk us into and we had a pre-interview discussion on this as well, on XDR is kind of a new term. Detection and response is critical at that endpoint, but now you've extended it a little bit. Maybe explain XDR and some of the new capabilities that you're bringing.
Okay, certainly, Chris. So I think maybe what is good is that for us to take a step back, and if we think about traditionally where we are very strong in is really on the unified EPP, which is the endpoint protection and the EDR, which is the endpoint detection and response. If you think about XDR, it's really the evolution of EDR, right? Because if you look specifically at EDR, it's all about optimizing threat intelligence, doing the investigation, the response at the endpoint, and doing all that real-time threat hunting. Now, extended detection response basically unifies the security relevant detections that we are getting from the endpoint, as well as the telemetry of all the other security products or solutions out there with the various business tools. And that is not limited to just the endpoint, right? It extends to things like network analysis, kind of solutions, emails, identity access management, cloud security, and so on. So the value of XDR basically is driven purely by the security analytics capabilities. And it's not just the Singularity platform. When we look at this, it's not just what we are providing from a solution perspective. We are also talking about the wealth of integration that we are doing with all the various third-party vendors, as well as solutions that is out there.
It's an interesting term, singularity. We talk about the point of singularity in AI. How smart can this get? And Evan mentioned sort of that real time. So really, and it's that integration, as you say, if you're extending it beyond that endpoint and that device and what it's integrating to and talking to and receiving information from, how clever can this actually get? It can actually get, as you say, that autonomous decision making as well.
Yes, it is a very good point. Now, one of the things that I need to explain also is that the DNA of the company has always been from the very beginning to unify things, right? So that's why we were the first vendor to unify EPP and EDR. So what we are constantly looking at is how do we consolidate all the efforts, I mean, all the integration into that single agent, and Singularity platform is where we are doing everything from the integration as well as the connectivity to all the various stuff. So if you think about how we have extended the solution, not just from a protection and detection response piece, we included stuff like network control, USB control, device control, that sort of stuff. Now, from an AI perspective, this becomes a little bit more interesting, is because we have patents on the AI machine learning mathematical models that we have developed and innovated. And all these patents are being incorporated into the product itself. So from that perspective, when we talk about Singularity as the XDR unifying all these things, right, it extends beyond just the detection and response, because it's going to cut across multiple security layers to provide the security team a centralized end-to-end visibility about all that's happening. So you're talking about that data lake, for lack of better words, to get that unified view of what's going on. Now, from that AI perspective, leveraging on what we have built, I think there are a couple of points that I would like to highlight about how this is going to help the organization. First of all, it's going to help eliminate blind spots across the stack of solutions that you've got, right? So we're talking about cross-stack visibility. We're talking about having the ability to also uncover stealthy attacks or cross-platform, cross-stack correlation, those kind of attacks that occurs. You're going to get that visibility, and then how we're going to enrich all that threat data with the integrated threat intelligence to give that visibility to the guys who are running the SOC and overall improve the overall efficiency altogether.
It's as you say, well, that's what we started with, is on how powerful this can be. It can be a busy market in endpoint protection as well. Evan, how are you finding the engagement with customers in the region? You have that an Australian accent, so you come in from an Australian perspective as well, but just in the region and the kind of the overview, how do you go to market, and how are you finding the market with SentinelOne?
Yeah, good question. And firstly, the accent tinged with a little bit of British. I lived in London for 11 years, so I'm not sure what it is now. a bit of a hybrid. But yeah, I mean, look, I think one of the things to acknowledge is that it's a busy space for customers to try and disseminate what is value. I think that's a really challenging. I think, in fact, if anything, that's a really big challenge we as an industry have to deal with today. and how do we get the right information to our customers? That's a whole nother story. But if we look at kind of where the endpoint space is today, I'll give you two, I guess there's two different tracks that we see. I'm going to take a step back. For a number of years where we had really antivirus, which was our kind of core security control. Every endpoint had an AV, and we really didn't see much innovation in that space for a long time. Signature-based controls, knowing the threat, writing the signature to then detect, prevent in the future. You know, the type of vendors that were supporting that technology, the way that you started to add value is you added value in addition to the AV. You saw DLP, you saw encryption, you know, firewall controls, you saw other things come in, and it really became more of a bloated suite with antivirus not really improving. Now, in the last number of years, we did see some innovation using artificial intelligence and machine learning, where you saw a next generation of antivirus type providers come through. And I think that made a significant improvement in really what was a core preventative control. Now, what we do also recognize is that prevention is not 100%. Okay, not, you know, I'd love to sit to talk to your audience and say that we'll prevent everything. I think that's a naive statement. We need to recognize that it's a really complex problem to solve, and you need defense in depth, and you need the ability to also try and get detection and response capabilities if something gets through. And that's the second part. That's the second track coming through, and we saw at around the same time as this next gen AV, we saw EDR players really starting to come to a pure play endpoint detection and response. Something will get through, you will be breached. How do you then respond to that? And now that first generation of EDR solutions did provide enhanced visibility. They certainly gave our customers better insight than they've had before, better response capabilities than they'd had before. But I also think too, it provided a new operational challenge, which is to kind of make sense of all the telemetry that was being pulled. You need some really highly skilled operators. So you needed the right people to be able to pull that together. We know that that's challenging, very hard to kind of scale that up in a meaningful way, because you needed the humans to kind of correlate all the telemetry. And so if you didn't have those skills, what you ended up is getting a lot of noise, okay? And you get a lot of needles, and you still got to find out where to go. Better visibility, but where do you turn? And so I think what we've seen is this first generation EDR is now merged into this kind of consolidated endpoint story that Kelvin spoke about, where we really see endpoint prevention, strong endpoint prevention controls, now with this next generation EDR capability coming together in a single agent, where we can provide really a capability to customers that is about trying to remove that kind of human layer and put them in more intelligent type activities. So we can move quicker, we can move at machine speed when these attacks occur. So this is the autonomous, this is using AI to really link all of those activities to tell a better storyline for the analyst, and then try and provide as much of as an automated response, and where possible, remediate as fast as possible to get back to a known good state. And that's really where SentinelOne has kind of pulled its Singularity platform together, and really we feel is starting to get good, robust traction in the marketplace. And so I think what you're seeing is a kind of this turbulence where there's been a number of legacy players or older players that are starting to, I think, lose their dominance. And we're seeing some new players really come up into this space. And that's really where SentinelOne has started to kind of elevate its presence. And I think that transition will continue to occur over the coming years. So it's a really exciting space to be. The endpoint is absolutely where a lot of the action is. But we need to be innovating in the space today, because what has been done in the past will not help us in the future. And we certainly need to leverage technology to help us on that response side, so that we can move as quickly as these attacks are occurring.
I think you've explained that really well. And the other thing, the other observation I'd add is, from a business perspective, the uptake on digitalization, the importance of data and information. You know, every business is a digital business today. So the criticality of these services and the amount of data that they can touch has also grown. And that kind of brings us to that point of the managed detection and response, and how, as you say, you talked about feeding that intel and the decision-making to the analyst. Not all businesses have that capability, or the analyst sitting there waiting. But the managed detection and response, because all networks are getting attacked at some point, continuously for some, but the managed detection and response, how does that work, Kelvin?
Okay, Chris, that is an interesting point. So when we look at the demographics of the customers that we have customers who have fully operated security staff, right? I mean, they are fully staffed, they are running a complete SOC, they have experts who are doing threat hunting and all that. In those kind of cases, they are fully, I mean, the maturity is slightly different, right? And then, of course, we've got the other end of the spectrum where you have just only a couple of individuals who are responsible for security, and then now they are now being taken on with this additional task on the detection response piece, on the protection of this particular platform. So what we offer to our customers is a service, right? So we call it vigilance. The vigilance service basically provides the additional manpower for the customers to provide assistance to their SOC, right? So we do have experts who basically look at the threats that are coming in, the indicators that has been happening in the environment, and provide that level of expertise to help them to understand what is going on, to provide the root cause analysis, and in that sense, give them a better understanding to maximize the value of the investments that they've made, right? So providing all that necessary digital forensic analysis as well as the incident response, those are the additional things that we can provide. Now, bear in mind that a lot of the details, a lot of the incidents that we would have detected would have been quarantined, we would have protected those devices, but understanding the background behind it, understanding the root cause, that actually requires a certain level of expertise and understanding, right? So that's where the managed detection response comes in, because that's where we can actually help even do the post-mortem consultation as well, and provide that future thinking in terms of guidance about what are the other things they could potentially look at to provide that holistic view.
One of the sort of ways to explain the attack surface as well, and particularly if you're trying to propose managed detection and response, is the Mitre Att&ck framework as well. Evan, maybe explain how SentinelOne covers across the Mitre Att&ck sort of framework. It's quite broad, but it's probably the best one to measure or test against for an enterprise.
Yeah, I will, but do you mind if I just add a comment to Kelvin's point just around the managed detection response? I mean, I think what's clear is that having that capabilities is incredibly important in today's environment. Now, we have a lot of partners offering managed detection response. So not only in that using our platform, but we're working heavily in tandem with those partnerships now to maybe augment their capability and augment their skills. So not just maybe from MDR into end customer, we're sitting and working a partnership with a number of those providers, because that's really critical, because it's those partners that'll be engaging with a number of those maybe different segments of the market that we're working with. And I think that's a really key differentiator on how SentinelOne looks at that. So it's a really key element. We understand the importance of MDR. I think Kelvin's done a great explanation. And we also want to emphasize that augmentation support in the partner ecosystem is incredibly important.
Well, that brings us to that endpoint, the marketplace that you are sort of dealing in. And I mentioned the Mitre Att&ck framework as a good benchmark for companies to go against. Where do you sit with the Mitre Att&ck framework?
Well, I'll give you a little bit of context on the Mitre side. I'll give you the business view, and then Kelvin will give you the kind of the technical insight. Because look, I've been in security now for, I hate to say it, 13 years, and over the course of that period, testing frameworks, testing organizations has been a very interesting topic, depending on whose perspective is being shared. And there has been, in my opinion, some consideration around the intentions of those, I guess, testing houses or groups, or whether there was bias or pay for play, or maybe outcomes that need to be achieved based upon the funding of that testing. And that's always made it a bit of a gray area, depending on who's kind of presenting that. And I think when the Mitre Att&ck testing, I guess, framework, and that's really kind of occurred over the last couple of years, I feel has brought maybe somewhat more independence back into this result, because the Mitre Corporation is a not-for-profit organization, does receive research and development funds from the US government, but was created the attack framework to try and look more independently at somewhat at the results or the outcomes of a particular testing methodology against a number of vendors, I guess any vendor that wanted to contribute to that, looking at attacks, APT type groups, and looking at their tools, tactics, and procedures to then help assess across a whole raft of areas the effectiveness of that technology against those known attacks. Now, there is no winner with Mitre. They don't come back and go, this vendor was number one. Yeah. What they do is publish, pardon me, all the results that customers or partners can then go in and compare them side by side using the Mitre framework. And I think that's fair. What you need to understand is how the tests were conducted and what the results delivered to you. And Kelvin will share a little bit around that. So I feel as if today it's kind of the gold standard in looking at testing at effectiveness in tool sets. And really what I believe they're trying to do is give the information in a way that is not meant to be biased, it's meant to be transparent. And then with that, you can then go off and make your decisions based upon that information. So I think that's a good prelude to really define why I think it is that gold standard and why people should be looking at Mitre and the Mitre Att&ck framework. And then Kelvin can give you a little bit more insight now on what those technical components will be and what they're testing for.
Yeah. And Kelvin, I was going to say it's a good one even from an enterprise to have the resources to look internally at their own potential vulnerabilities across that framework as well. But I talked about some accolades that SentinelOne can refer to, and one is that 100% visibility from the Mitre Att&ck framework and that test. So maybe talk us through the visibility that it provides in contrast to the Mitre Att&ck framework.
Okay, excellent. All right, so I echo the same sentiments as Evan in the sense that I've seen so many evaluations that's been done, and Mitre by far is non-biased. The results, it is what it is in terms of the figures, the numbers, and so on, right? What is interesting about Mitre is that the most recent evaluation is actually based on a 2-day detection focus kind of measurement against products and looking at all the various chain of events, the security analytics around it, and how well the product would actually fare in that kind of emulated attacks. So specifically, the most recent one is around the Kelvin and the Fin7 attack. It was done in a control lab where vendors will basically put in their solutions, configure it, and then measure against the techniques that's been used by these attackers. Now, this is not the first time that Mitre has done this sort of evaluation. It's been, I think, the third one running. SentinelOne has been involved since the very first, and you could actually go to the Mitre Att&ck evaluation website and have a look at the results. Compare the results about how a specific vendor or any vendor has improved over the years and make that comparison between the two. So Chris, to your point about that 100% visibility, that is very interesting, is because they have at least 4 categories of testing that they were doing, right? And visibility was by far, we are the only vendor that had delivered 100% visibility in terms of the zero miss detections across all the testing operation system. So I think that one was a huge accolade for us, right? Now, if you think about it, visibility is the foundation of any EDR, right? The concept of not knowing what you do not know, if you have complete visibility, then this is where you can see everything that's happening. And that gives you that huge potential in which you can then see and unlock the necessary procedures and the process that is needed in detecting this, and how do you actually provide the mitigation for that. So I think that one is a key point.
Yep. It's again a good accolade, but it's a good result as well for clients and customers to look for. The other one is the Gartner Magic Quadrant for Endpoint Protection. And as it happened just yesterday, I was talking to a senior information security professional, quite senior, very experienced, and was giving Gartner a good plug in terms of their reports. So it's a good segue. It's what would clients do in terms of the market as well, looking at the Magic Quadrant where SentinelOne sits in for endpoint protection. Evan, how does that help you, I suppose, as a as the leader here in the region, talking to customers, partners, and clients?
Yeah, one of the most important things that we need to establish when we enter new markets, and obviously we're aggressively kind of working through Asia Pacific and Japan with the team, is you need validation. Clearly, we can turn up and we can tell you how good we are, and we can put you in front of customers, and there's lots of things we can do to provide that personalized validation, but Gartner holds a lot of sway. I mean, their brand is strong. They have people dedicated to understanding these segments of the market, and no customer can dedicate their own team to the amount of research that someone like Gartner does. So let's acknowledge that their research is valuable. Let's acknowledge that their brand is strong, and people do hold a lot of, a lot of sway with what Gartner says. Now, the Magic Quadrant that has just been released, there was a gap, because of, it's just, isn't it ironic, 2020, based upon nothing linked with COVID, I believe, but clearly it just 2020 was one of those years. But the Magic Quadrant in itself reflects a couple of things. It's really the ability to execute, how the product's being received in the market, what's the feedback, a client's adopting it, and then it's married up with their vision. Okay, and with that, you then get a kind of a position in within the quadrant of how that vendor is performing. And I think there's a couple of other trends tied with that, and I'll talk about our position and why I feel like the Endpoint Protection Magic Quadrant that's just released becomes even more relevant for our customers. Is Gartner also calls out a couple of other trends. One, I think the work from home situation with COVID. I mean, this is the new normal now. I think we all felt maybe this would be over in a short period of time, but we're 18 months on, going to 2 years to 3 years. I think this new hybrid working environment is here to stay. Yep. And that means the endpoint is really the new perimeter, because people are working outside the boundary of the organization, potentially unmanaged devices, unsecured networks, accessing applications anywhere around the world. This really is where the action is happening. So incredibly important. And I think we can also acknowledge, whilst I've been in security 13 years, I'm not veteran compared to some other individuals. What I do feel in the last number of years is we've seen the frequency, the escalation of these attacks, the severity of these attacks seem to be increasing. SolarWinds Sunburst, nation state attack, the recent attack on the gas pipeline in the US, all of that has suggested we're dealing with real stakes now, substantial money, and real impact to the lives that we deal with, which really kind of flows through into the Magic Quadrant for endpoint, because really what we're dealing with primarily endpoints, and so it's incredibly important that customers think about hardening and really driving more robust capability in this particular, given those trends. And so we're really pleased the fact that this is our first year in the Gartner Magic Quadrant leaders position, and so we've been able to show movement up the y-axis. So we've been able to execute very well, and we've been also show strong vision, and so we've moved also to the right hand side. And again, very pleasing. Our customers and partners that we work with today, we want to thank them for their support, because clearly their feedback allows us to continually improve. We have a great team, and that's seen us continue to execute in the market. So very pleasing. But what Gartner has been able to call about are some specific areas that I think we should talk about. Ease of deployment, cloud readiness. Okay, they talk about as we see more and more people move services to the cloud, that's going to be incredibly important. The Mitre Att&ck testing results, strong, robust prevention controls. Again, where we can prevent, we should always be doing that. But Gartner also calls out one other area for people that may not be familiar. They also have their critical capabilities. This is kind of like a secondary report where they look at different customer types. They have A, B, C, more forward-leaning customers, the early adopters. They have the kind of category B, which are more mainstream, a little bit more cautious, but they're definitely prepared to take a bit more of a risk. And then the category C, which is they're definitely looking at what the market does before they make investments. And SentinelOne was the leader because it looks at the product now, product specifically against those customer categories. And we were the #1 provider across all of those three. So very well respected in our position in the market now, and they feel our product solution or our technology fits very well against these different customer types, and all of that has contributed to I think the recognition by Gartner and our performance. So We are going to work incredibly hard to improve on that next year. Obviously, the work started the day the report was released to go about that improvement. But again, we can use this now, I hope, in the market to take to our customers and prospects and say, look, we've been saying to you that there's a lot of value and benefit in engaging SentinelOne. Look at the Gartner report now, have a deep look at it, look at what they say, and hopefully that gives you confidence to invest with us as a strategic cybersecurity partner.
Very good. And I think, Kelvin, maybe what you see from the engineering perspective as well of where some of those key pain points are, like what is the sort of the not so much the differentiation, but from a customer, rather than SentinelOne calling them and saying, hey, have you seen us, or we've got a new report out from Gartner, you need to look at us. It's more the other way. I'd like to, the customers and the enterprise need to appreciate the amount of attacks going on, as Evan touched on, across all industries. They have to assume that they've been compromised, or they are sort of in the Mitre Att&ck framework in terms of the chain. What do you see the key pain points are that really link SentinelOne back to the enterprise and the customer?
Yeah, Chris, that is a interesting point, and that is a discussion that I have with many prospects before they became my customers, right? Became our customers. When we talk about some of the pain points, the concept of time to contain. Again, time to contain meaning the point where you detect that you have been breached or there was an incident or an attack, to the point where you contain the problem and bring the machine back to the working state. That time to contain is a very key topic that a lot of organizations think of, right? So meaning that when something happens, what are the processes in place? What are the responses that could be automated? What are the people, process, and technology in play, right? So those are the kind of things that
it should be a key metric for them, shouldn't it? Really, it is.
It is a key metric. Now, I get various responses from various people, whether it's from the CISO to the operational team. They have different priorities, right? But at the end of the day, how are they able to disconnect the machine or isolate the machine and do the repair and restoration becomes very, very painful for them. And especially to what Evan has mentioned, right? Today, the new normal is such that a lot of our employees now are working from home outside of the corporate network infrastructure. So how do we actually achieve that? So those are the kind of level of discussions that I have, how we can actually help them in terms of the technology that we've got, leveraging on the AI, machine learning stuff, the automated response, and all those pieces come into play, right? And how that fits into their overall process. I think, like what you mentioned, there are some of these high-profile attacks that occurred recently, right? Even with Colonial Pipeline. Surely they would have some form of security solutions and process in place. But when we think about a syndicate like DarkSide, it is no longer that single hacker or the individual that's trying to attack the system, right? It's going to be a whole syndicate, a whole team of individual experts hiding behind aliases and so on, and leveraging on next generation attack tools, most of which could be automated as well. So you really need an automated response for an automated attack.
Yep. And the other one was they're not just looking at one potential vulnerability. They'll look at their target from, again, back to the Mitre Att&ck framework. They'll look across that, and most enterprises will have multiple vulnerabilities across that framework that they need to be looking at any one time. So it's a nice link back when you've got 100% visibility from something like SentinelOne across that, and that's how enterprises should be measuring themselves against. So look, on that note, it's an extremely interesting platform. I love, we hear a lot of the buzzwords around AI and machine learning, but when you've got one called Singularity, I think you've got to sort of stand up and actually take a look. It's quite an impressive looking platform as well in terms of the dashboard. So it's worth having a look at some of the videos off your website. And again, I think just keep SentinelOne in your mind in terms of the audience, and you'll start to see them in the market. You'll start to see some of the accolades they're getting, and they'll start to stand out to you. But obviously with the latest Gartner Magic Quadrant for endpoint protection, if you're looking at those reports, again, have a look at who's leading out, and you'll see SentinelOne. So Evan Davidson, the Vice President for the region, and Kelvin Wee, the Security Engineer, thank you very much for joining us here on MySecurity TV and our Cybersecurity Weekly podcast.
Thank you. It's been great to join.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Okay. Bye-bye.